Well, hi there, everybody. Welcome to a timely return of the Gary Neville Podcast. I guess timely, perhaps, for football fans, apart from Man United fans.
Yeah.
But it is the highest-scoring Manchester derby ever, and we've watched it. What do you make of it?
I think you just, to start with, have to give credit to City for their football, their outstanding players, their outstanding manager, and a striker that, to be fair, sometimes you see everything right. The physical attributes, the technical attributes, the attitude, and then you get genuine world class. Manchester United had a player on the bench, Cristiano Ronaldo, that's been world class for 10, 15 years. But we're seeing the next generation of world class player, and I have to say, what we've seen here today, Martin, I know that Phil Foden scored a hat-trick and he's a local player and he should be incredibly proud, and he's a brilliant English player, but Erling Haaland is something completely different. We are in the presence of something really special. I think we know that. The numbers that he's hitting at the start of this season, the performances, the way in which he makes very difficult things look very easy, and he's unplayable. So that's the takeaway from today on the initial thought is that, well done Manchester City, but I have to say, as a football person, when you're watching something like that out there, De Bruyne, David Silva, we've seen some great Manchester City players, Aguero, all these great players, but this has the ability to be something that just peaks everything.
You spent some time with him this week. What did you learn from that you've seen today, perhaps?
Do you know something? I didn't think he would be anything else in midweek when I met him, to be honest with you, than what he was, which was just confident but humble, relaxed, good in the interview, no problem to him. He was now late, which is a little bit annoying, Erling. Come on, turn up on time next time. But no, I enjoyed speaking to him for half an hour. And like I say, I think no matter who you support, like I'm a United fan, I'm disappointed with what I've seen today. And we'll come on to that in a bit. But you sometimes see a player that just stands out above anything else. And I have to say that we've seen that today. He took this game by the scruff of the neck. City were playing well. They were dominant. And we've seen City dominant for 5, 6, 7 years, 10 years, whatever it's been that they've been winning leagues. But then you combine that explosion with the domination that City have and that possession that they have, and it's something like that's different. It's different.
Well, it was 1-0, and United were just gently getting back into it a bit. At 1-0, of course, they've all got every chance of getting back in. And then 2 Haaland goals in 4 minutes, and he's just dragged it away from them.
That's what he has the ability to do, take the game away on his own. And the great players do. They have that ability just to be able to maybe pull a game back that you think you're never going to get back into, to a game that's 1-0 and all of a sudden it's 4-0 and it's just them that's had that 5-10 minute period. I mean, I actually went down and asked how many touches that he's had, and it came back to me that he'd had the lowest number of touches on the City team, which wasn't a surprise to me because he'd hardly been in the game, and that's become the norm now. But the one thing that I spoke to him about the other day when I saw him, I said, for a young player, you have great patience. Martin, we've seen young players over the years, and ordinarily they're eager to get involved in the game if they're not in the game. And that can be a goalkeeper at one end of the pitch, it can be a striker at the other. But he plays like a 26, 27-year-old striker, one that waits and knows that if he hangs in those right spaces, that if he gets the timing right of his runs, that everything's going to come to him. So you never see him make runs. I asked him about the fact that you don't get bored sometimes when your team are keeping 70% possession and they're not passing it to you. He said, sometimes, yeah, I do a little bit. I'm just stood up there. But then he knows that De Bruyne pass is coming, or that corner and that set piece, that delivery is going to come at some point in the game. And that's the great thing, consistency, patience, composure. I don't know what to say. There are no words really to describe him. This Manchester City team, with him in it, they were already a brilliant team. But with him in it, they're so much more dangerous, but so much more exciting as well, I feel, because they can score different types of goals. And
involved in Foden's second and third goal, particularly the second one, with the pass across just before half-time to make it 4-0.
I used to watch goals like that. The team that I played for, Manchester United, Rooney, Tevez, Ronaldo, Ji-sung Park, your counter-attack goals that you just thought, oh my God, what have I just seen? I'd sometimes be looking up the pitch at them and thinking, how have they just done that? You can't mark that. That goal just before half-time that Foden scored, the De Bruyne pass into Haaland, the Haaland sort of fierce pass come across, right across that Manchester United goal, and the arrival of the sprinting player just putting it into the back of the net. I have to say it was an unbelievable goal, one that sobers you up and makes you realise that you're in the presence of a fantastic football team. The Haaland goal in the second half, even just the way he finishes it, it's emphatic. There's nothing else to say about it. And look, we all know about this Manchester City team last season and what it was missing. And I think I don't know if it was Carragher actually yesterday mentioned on Twitter, if Jesus was playing for Manchester City like it is for Arsenal last season, would City have signed Haaland? Gabriel Jesus has been brilliant and I actually love him to pieces. I loved him when he was here and I love him at Arsenal. But this is a different stratosphere of player, and that's not a criticism of Gabriel Jesus. This is a Zidane, the Brazilian Ronaldo, the Portuguese Ronaldo, those types of players that I used to play against sometimes during my career where you think they're on another level. That's what we're seeing here, something that's just right up there.
Well, let's move to Manchester United. Before the game, I think Erik ten Hag probably received a few compliments when the team was announced. He stuck with his men from the 4 straight wins, but of course 4 weeks ago, and the big clamour here in Manchester was for Casemiro to come in and stiffen the resolve. Now that the resolve wasn't stiffened, are we being wise after the event?
No, look, I don't think that if you're coming off this game and you're analysing Manchester United's performance, you should be saying, why wasn't Casemiro starting alongside McTominay? That's a really big mistake from Erik ten Hag. I don't feel that at all sat here. I feel like the players that he put out on that pitch have been confident together. I know there's been the disruption of the international break and the Queen passing, which, isn't helpful when the team are on a good run, but then all the teams have had to cope with that. It was the unforced errors, the anxiety on the ball, the lack of composure, and I'm not talking about sort of some of the players at the back in defensive positions who were being pressed. I'm talking about the midfield players and the forwards, Rashford, Eriksen, Fernandes, McTominay, man, they could name more. They were all giving it away in that first half unnecessarily. And it just then brings further, I suppose, negative vibe throughout the team when your best players aren't handling the ball well. And they should have been better, a lot better. They were forcing it far too early. It's almost like they got into their heads, when we get it, we've got to counter-attack. We've got to put the ball in behind City. But to do that, you've got to play those 2 or 3 passes in midfield and through midfield to set it up. You can't just think you're going to get the ball, play one pass, and then turn and just knock it over the top. And centre-backs, even if they're not City's best centre-backs, are not going to read that. It just became really simple for City's defenders to be able to cope with it. And like I say, I thought the first half, the standout for me, look, there were problems with Dalot in defence. There were problems at centre-back, Varane and Martinez. There were problems at left-back with Malacia. There's no doubt they didn't have their best day. But the standout thing for me was how badly Manchester United's players in midfield and up front handled that ball in the first half. Because if you're playing here, the only teams that I've ever seen do well here have had to cope with, obviously, defending lots during the game, but they've also been able to punch through City and demonstrate that you can hurt them, and that makes the crowd a little bit nervous. United never gave City that in the first half. They just encouraged City all the time by giving the ball away in really poor areas, and like I say, it was from players that you just wouldn't expect it of. So I use the word bottled it. They froze, nervous, lack composure, whatever one of those you want to use. That was all of them in a bucket, really.
None of the back 4 had played in a Manchester derby before.
And that showed. Look, you're playing against the top team. City had players missing, but up front, you've got Grealish, Foden and Haaland, fed by Bernardo Silva and De Bruyne. With Gundogan, actually, who's a brilliant passer in midfield as well. So there's a lot being asked of that back 4. I expected them to handle it better. Varane's a very experienced player. Experienced goalkeeper. Martinez has been, I think, seen plenty of big games, in the Champions League with Ajax. I expected they would handle it better defensively. Dalot in the first few minutes, Grealish got on top of him. Malacia really sort of never really handled Foden. The 2 centre-backs, it's difficult. It's difficult. I expect them to handle it better, but I wouldn't put the blame of today on the back 4. I was more disappointed with how Manchester United's midfield and forward players were. I thought it was really poor in that first half. They didn't turn up, and you've not got a chance if they don't. I think for United's point of view, there have been times in the past, Martin, where I've got really excitable about a defeat like that, and I felt as though, where are they going? What are they doing? I don't feel like that today because of the team that they're playing against is exceptional, and the 4 weeks off I think that can have a little bit of an impact.
And maybe the 2 late goals
And
as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The 2 late goals, I think, I nearly said it in commentary, but I'll say it on here. Sir Alex Ferguson, the odd time we were getting beat 3-0 or 4-0 or 5-0 at Newcastle, and he always used to come in at the end and say, you got a goal, and we were 5-1 or it was 3-1. That's important. Never forget, it's important. Always finish the game with something that takes you into the next game, because the reality of it is you have to turn up next week. And he used to say that all the time, and I never used to really sort of listen to it, because when you get beat 3-1 or 2-1 even, you're just disappointed that you've lost the game. You don't really care how you've lost. But I think it does matter that Manchester United came back and scored 3 goals in the second half. I think it'll bug Pep a little bit. Just a little bit, 6-3. I think he'll think, no, that's not what this game was about today. That was a 6-0, it was a 6-1. So I think there were little things that I think you could point towards that mean that Manchester United, the big thing for United is what we see in the next 2 or 3 weeks now and the reaction from that. Is that a blip off the back of a period of sort of being dormant, not being playing? Strange period for the whole country, obviously, with the Queen passing, where we didn't know whether we were playing or not, and then obviously the international break where everyone gets back later in the week, and United had quite a few players away. So there are things, and I'm not making excuses here, there are no excuses what I've seen out there today, but I don't feel like it's something in the past, like that's a massive rot. I do expect them to be better next week, and I do expect them to recover and put that one to bed straight away. I don't expect that that's going to be sort of what we're going to see in this next few weeks. If it is, then I'll be sat talking to you and saying that was the start of a major issue that was developing. I don't feel like that. I've seen that. I don't feel like I've seen that today from United. I think they responded okay in the second half, and we're just playing against something absolutely abnormal in Haaland and City. I think City could win this league by 15 to 20 points, and that's a ridiculous statement to make when they're not even top of the league at this moment in time. But I think they're that good. When the league settles down, when they start to really get into, just the signs are there. They're scoring that many goals. They've not even got they've got 3 of the best players missing today. I just feel like they could win this league quite easily. I hope it's not the case, obviously, because I want us to have competition and it to be really a fascinating season and to be pushed all the way, if not, to be fair, be beaten. But I just feel like what I've watched there is something exceptional.
You saw the Arsenal-Tottenham game yesterday. The home team won, and the team that's top of the league won. The in-form team as well as Man City are. Spurs unbeaten to that point in the league, but the counter-attacking team, as we saw Manchester United try to be here, has it, apart from being home wins and maybe the home team's a favourite, whatever the style of football, but has it shown that the team that want to take the initiative are going to get the prizes, and if you sit back waiting to play on the break, you might come up a bit short? I know it's probably a big question.
I think, to be fair, Martin, I think we've seen it coming over the years now, that the dominant team, the one who enjoys the ball and wants the ball, is winning a lot more of these games, and we're seeing what would be less proactive teams, the more pragmatic teams that want to play on the counter-attack, not having the success that they maybe once could have, and the direct teams that played the ball forward quickly, nowhere near having the success that they once had. And I think that can only be a positive thing generally. I think that we quite often in big games at Manchester United would play on the counter-attack and sit back and draw a team on. But I'm seeing now more and more that you've got to be dominant in possession all the time. And I have to say that, yesterday, I thought Spurs were awful. I don't think we should apologise for saying that. I thought their ambition was poor. I thought that they played too deep. I think it sent a message to Arsenal. Yeah, they got back into the game, and you're thinking, well, Conte can win a game like that. We've seen managers over the years who've been brilliant at winning games in that what would be sort of passive manner where they sit back and wait, and then they'll go and get a counter-attack. But we're seeing a lot less of it. It's becoming a lot less of a sort of theory that can succeed in football. And yesterday, I have to say that Arsenal won the game. They won the game well. And it makes the team that are trying that tactic of sitting back look really poor. It makes them look awful. It makes them looking negative and like they've no idea. It's where maybe United got to under Jose Mourinho and under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer sometimes in big games, where they had no idea other than that sort of what would be sitting back and going,
Rashford and Martial,
yeah, that's it, we'll just try and counter-attack. But that's no longer for a club. I'm just wondering what's going on. There's stewards running all over the pitch. I think there's a stray United fan stayed in at the end. I don't know why he stayed in, to be fair. That is loyalty. But I think that we're seeing less success with that type of football. I've never thought you could be, other than in Leicester, can you think of a team that have not dominated possession most of the time that have won this league in the last 15, 20 years? Not really now. You don't see it. You have to be a very proactive team on the front foot, pressing, doing all the right things. And I think that's where Erik ten Hag, to be fair to him, he has stepped back. We saw a graphic before the game which said in the last 4 games they've had 42% possession.
And they had 60% when they were losing.
Yeah, and then 60% when they were losing, but also they played a lot more long balls, and it had a comparable graphic between the first 2 games and the next 4. So I think he's had to step back to go forward. I think he's had to regroup, and that's no problem. But we all know where Erik ten Hag wants to get this United team to. He wants 75% possession. He wants players that can handle the ball, not just actually in the middle of midfield, but defenders can handle the ball. The goalkeeper needs to be brilliant on the ball. And I suspect that with David De Gea, his career at Manchester United is probably going to be short-lived under Erik ten Hag, because he's absolutely going to be adamant that his philosophy of playing out from the back, playing through midfield, playing those little risky passes that we see City and Ederson do all the time, that we no longer see as risky because they do it so well, is something that I think he's striving for and wants to get to.
Another hot topic is Liverpool, who we haven't talked about in glowing terms, or nobody has really. Where do you see their problems lying?
I have to say, I watched the goals against, and there was a big conversation about
weekend of hat-tricks, the Trossard getting a hat-trick.
Yeah, there was a big conversation, wasn't there, on Friday around Trent Alexander-Arnold, and Jurgen Klopp put his defence up of him, and he was involved in a couple of the goals, maybe even all 3 yesterday. I'm actually going to do a piece on Trent Alexander-Arnold on Monday Night Football tomorrow, because I feel as though I've wanted to do it for a long time around this idea of what we do know about football now is that you can't be a fullback in the modern game without having the ability to go forward well. It's near on impossible. That there is an expectation now you'll be good on the ball going forward. And that's why we don't see Wan-Bissaka playing under Erik ten Hag at Manchester United, because he's not seen or deemed as capable enough on the ball in the sort of what would be setting up play or then progressing into the final third. But I think it should also be said that, I agree with Jurgen Klopp. You can no longer sit here and say, defending's his priority, defending's his first job. No, I don't agree. I agree with Jurgen Klopp on that. But what we almost must say is that the balance between being a good defender and being a good attacker is imperative, and that you cannot be 70-80% attacker and only 10% defender when you're a fullback either. So I think what Trent's got at this moment in time is a little bit of imbalance in his game between what would be the attacking part and the defensive part. And you can have a brilliant attacking game like he has, and a less competent maybe defensive part, but one that gets you through moments in games and you're capable of dealing with things. I think Trent's got to work on his defending. I think there are things that I see in his game, and I said it 2 or 3 years ago, I thought that his lack of seriousness in his defending and his lack of alertness would at some point in his career hold him back. Because if Liverpool aren't in as good a period as they have been for 4 or 5 years, which is what's happening at the moment, or he plays for a less superior team in possession, like England, then there is going to be a greater expectation that he's going to be basically in a defensive position for the majority of the game or for more of the game. And that's what we're seeing at the moment. And it's causing him some pain. But he's only young. But it's an important juncture, I think, in his career. A very important juncture in his career where it's not a time to wade into him. It's not a time to sort of give up on him. It's a time to get right behind him, because he's one of the most exceptional talents that you'll ever see as a fullback on the ball. But I have said that there is an example in his own team of where I think the balance is right, and that's his left back, Robertson, who I think goes forward, plenty of assists, lots of passes into his strikers, lots of good play into midfield, but also he's competitive and he's good down that side in terms of his defending. So I think that for me, I remember in the early parts of my career when I was a centre-back, I wasn't very good as a one-on-one defender, and actually was hopeless going forward on the ball for the first 2 or 3 years at Manchester United. And what I recognised is that the first part I had to get really what I call bright on my feet as a defender, get low, get jockeying. I used to go up to Brian Pop Robson in the summer. Who was, you remember Brian Pop Robson, a player from West Ham, and
balance and the skill on your feet.
Yeah, but he had this. He'd done some work with Steve Howe at the time, and I remember having these jockeying exercises, getting low and being able to twist from sort of side to side. And they used to say things to me like a dog never turns his back. And if you think about a dog, when a dog's looking for a tennis ball, do it if you've never seen it. Oh, it's fascinating. You'll have never thought of it in the context of being a defender. But they used to do loads of work with me being jockeying. And every single game before a game, the rest of the lads used to laugh at me and Phil sometimes. But we'd literally be jockeying all the time, be low, and then you'd step forward and you'd step back. And that alertness in your defending and that brightness. Trent's very upright when he defends. So I had to learn sort of the idea of being a one-on-one defender, getting out to people quickly, then slowing down if they've got control of it, and then backing up, and then being able to go forward. And the idea of that sort of shifting of your feet quickly. And then there was that next part that Don Howe worked on with me, which was the alertness when the ball was on the opposite side of the pitch. Don Howe was the best defensive coach I've ever seen at coaching a fullback when the ball wasn't near you. His view was that fullbacks were pretty good defending usually when the ball was on their side. The problems that fullbacks mainly have is when the ball isn't near them. It's in central areas or on the other side when they don't know whether to be in next to the centre-back or out with the winger, or they just don't get the gaps and the spaces right. And you used to have you swivelling your head and you used to have checking your distances, and that computer that he used to call used to be going analysing where you should be all the time. So those 2 or 3 things that I worked on for 2 or 3 years every single day made me into a pretty decent defensive fullback. And then I recognised, I was watching all these players like Roberto Carlos and Maldini and Cafu in European football going forward and scoring goals and swerving it like this and putting these crosses in. And I was seeing Dennis Irwin on the other side of the pitch contributing with free kicks, and I thought, I'm really basic. And I started working on my crossing with Jim Ryan. And this was when I was in the first team. And I'd go out in the afternoon and I'd practice my channel ball, which was a great ball into Dwight York, Andy Cole, Eric Cantona.
Striker's dream.
Yeah. Actually, it's a cross. A good channel ball whipped into the striker's is a good cross also. I was putting pressure on myself in the final third, thinking that a cross was something special. And I started to think about slowing myself down and practicing, 30, 40, 50 times every afternoon, longer strides, slower strides, and whipping that ball into the box. And it took me probably till I was 26, 27 to become a decent, what I call, attacking fullback, where I overlapped and then put balls into the box of real good quality. And it was over 5-6 years that I developed my game.
But you did it in reverse to what you're saying to Trent.
Yeah. I actually learned to be a defender first and foremost, and then be an attacker. He's got all the attacking attributes. He doesn't need to learn anything in that part of his game. I'm sure he'll still work on it. But you can develop your game. You can work on these things. And the more you work on it, the more confident you get. And I wanted to say this about Trent for such a long, long time, because I've been there where I've had those difficulties of being out in a wide area, feeling exposed. He gets no support really at times from Salah outside him. I used to get support, by the way, as well. So there were times in games where Darren Fletcher, David Beckham, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer would play on the right-hand side. Not so much Cristiano. I think that's when we'd cover for him by pulling Darren Fletcher. But David Beckham and Darren Fletcher would work up and down like dogs to protect me. I don't see Trent, to be fair to him, getting that level of protection. So I feel for him in that sense as well.
But is the focus on him masking other problems at Liverpool at the moment?
Look, I'm just talking about him because I'm passionate about fullbacks. Yeah. I've played in that position. I've been on that journey. There has been a conversation about him. He made a couple of mistakes yesterday. No, the bigger issue of Liverpool is not Trent Alexander-Arnold. But there is always a focal point. It means Van Dijk's not playing at his absolute best. They're obviously not settled without Mane. Mane's disappearance from Liverpool is causing a problem.
Some injuries as well.
Midfield, to be fair, has caused them a problem. You question whether they should have signed, a world-class midfield player in the summer and all those sorts of things. And also, they've been outperforming they've been punching well above the weight, haven't they?
Team greater than the sum of the individual parts.
Exceptional manager, absolutely brilliant manager. Wonderful team spirit, married with the crowd over the last few years, coming together. And they've had an outstanding time. But when you look at their net spend compared to these two clubs today, they are competing with, to be fair, both hands behind their back. So actually, when Liverpool, I've always said this, when Liverpool start to perform at their level, where the money sort of, how they've recruited, how Jurgen Klopp's coached the team, how the players have performed, when they start to compete at the level where the investment takes them, that's when I think there'll be an issue with probably FSG, and the Liverpool fans will start thinking, hang on a minute, we need to be spending at the same level as the other clubs like Chelsea have done this summer. But I don't panic too much about Liverpool in the sense of, I won't panic about Liverpool anyway. But if I was Liverpool, I won't be panicking too much. They have still got, I think, the best performing manager in this league in the last 4 or 5 years with what he's done, with the sort of the spend that he's had. But you're right, at the moment, it's not right. We're not seeing that ferocious press.
And he knows it's not right,
We all know it's not right. So, but they've built up too much credit, in my view, to what would be stick the knife in at this point, just too early into a sort of a start to a difficult season. Yeah, Liverpool fans will be worried. Jurgen Klopp will be worried. I'll listen to Jamie Carragher talk tomorrow night. He's far closer to the detail of sort of watching Liverpool. And there'll be some disappointment, I think, in terms of where they're at now, and they'll realise they're miles off this level today. And you think to yourselves, well, are they going to compete this year for the title? Probably not. You never know, because to be fair, Jurgen Klopp can do the exceptional, and he has, to be fair, over the last few years surprised us incredibly. I mean, how they stayed on City's coattails last season. It feels like 3 years ago last season, doesn't it? Was it last season when they stayed on the coattails?
They've changed them in 3 of the last 4 seasons. Yeah.
There was one season where they had an off season where United finished above them.
But that was when they had the injuries. That was 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago. Last season, just to do what they did was incredible. So look, I think Liverpool, no doubt, not at the best. But
we had the finish here. Liverpool nearly pipped City on the last day, didn't they?
Josh, it feels like about 14 years ago. Don't you? This last 4 weeks feels about 3 years ago. It was last season, obviously, where they just, they pushed them right to the end, and they had no right to, really. They had no right to, in my mind. But they've got to regroup. Núñez has got to settle in. Diaz, Núñez, Jota, Salah. They've got exceptional players up there. But they've got to get back to that level and standard that they've set. And that's not always easy, because they've been, like I say, I'll use it again, they've been out-punching opponents that they shouldn't have been really for many years now.
I can't let you go without a word on England. Obviously a Nations League campaign to forget. Finished almost on a high with 15 minutes or so that looked like they were going to turn a defeat into a win. Ended up as a draw, but no wins in the 6 games. And you've been there, you know what it's like. What do you read the signs for England now that those prep games are over and Gareth's got to pick his World Cup squad, and we're into this strange situation of a Winter World Cup where we don't know whether the players will be exhausted from playing 3 games a week here before they go. But it's exciting, it's soon as well, and we're both going to be there.
Yeah, I actually really I think the first thing, I really enjoyed the game on Monday night. I was happy for Gareth in the second half that, we saw that comeback and that response. I mean, there were 4 Nation League games, I think, in the summer, weren't there?
Yeah. 4 in June in a very short space of time.
And then 2 here.
Yeah.
I have to say, Martin, and I've said this before, I thought the 4 games in June were a bit of a joke. I don't think any of us wanted football at that point in the year.
You had players like Kevin De Bruyne speaking out against it for Belgium. Yeah.
Players like De Bruyne, who are the consummate professional, who wouldn't shirk anything in his football career. The fans didn't want the games, the players didn't want the games, the coaches didn't want the games, and they had 4 of them in the summer. It was ahead of a World Cup, a long season. It wasn't right. So I have to say I switched off myself from England in terms of the summer. I think the players did. I mean, Gareth suffers for it now a little bit in terms of how they're doing, because people say, well, look at the run going into the World Cup. I have to say, and it's dangerous to say it, because it might be that we get to the World Cup in a few weeks' time and we're saying the signs were there. England weren't good. I don't feel like that. I almost feel like those players, to be fair, where they've got to in the last few seasons, getting to World Cup semi-finals and European Championship finals, you get to those Nation League games in the summer, it's just a massive come down. And I just think that they've switched off and thought, and now that's not good enough, obviously. We can't condone that, and Gareth wouldn't condone that, because there are 80, 90,000 fans sometimes turning up for games, and thousands of England fans travelling abroad, spending lots of money. So you can't say that's good enough. It's not. But I get it a little bit. When people like Kevin De Bruyne are coming out and speaking against this tournament in the summer, I'm not sure what the Nations League is. I think it was quite good in its early, it replaced friendlies. I think
it suffered because the World Cup's been moved.
It suffered badly because of the World Cup, so it's taken a battering. And I have to say, I think that England should still remain, confident as an England fan going into the World Cup, because I've just seen here today, Foden and Grealish. And I watched Kane yesterday, even a disappointing Tottenham game, and I saw Saka, and I saw other players playing like Ben White, and I think we've got some pretty good players. I mean, obviously we've got a couple of issues, but we've got some good players who are going to cause a lot of very good teams problems. Now, I think Calvin Phillips, I don't know, Martin, you might be closer to it than I am.
It's touch and go, isn't it?
It's touch and go. I think he's important. I love Bellingham. I thought Bellingham on Monday evening in that second half, to me, that was... I used to watch Brian Robson play for England, where he used to drag the team forward and sort of when they were in difficult situations. And I thought Bellingham the other night dragged that team forward. Thought he was absolutely outstanding from a young player. And then I know he captained Dortmund yesterday. So mature, so brilliant. There'll be an avalanche of inquiries for him from the Premier League, I'm sure, very soon, if not already. So I think that Rice, Bellingham looked okay, but I think it could just leave England a little open. I do want to see Bellingham in the team somewhere, so I'm not quite sure how that's going to work. But I thought we saw the quality of Mount when he came on the other night. You see that sort of the players that we have, I'm still encouraged. I don't know about you, but I mean, you go and watch England a lot more than I do nowadays. But I have to say, I'm encouraged by England. I'm encouraged by Gareth. I'm encouraged that they've got it right in the last 2 tournaments and know how to get it right. And I don't see what I'm seeing in these last 6 Nation League games as being their... I don't see it as being their sort of their... what they are. It's not them.
No, it's not their portfolio.
No, it's not
it?
what they are.
No.
That's not their CV. Their CV's better than that. And I think they'll switch it on. And I think they'll get to the tournament. I think they'll realise, right, here we are, World Cup.
And they'll be in full working order because we go from one weekend
yeah.
to playing the next weekend in the World Cup.
I think I don't know if you're on the Fulham Manchester United. I asked actually last week that there's a Fulham Manchester United game, which I think is the very last game on the Sunday afternoon on the is it 13th of November? I think it's the 13th of November or 12th of November, and then we go. I mean, we're literally there. The game's the week after, so there is absolutely no time. The players are going to be going in, well, fit and ready, you think, if they're playing in the Premier League. And we've complained for years for England about summer tournaments and being knackered at the end of a season, a long season, and the Premier League is sort of a league that suffers more than most. We've got no excuses. Qatar, it's going to be 20 odd degrees, it's not going to be too hot. We've got
no time difference, couple of
no
hours.
time difference, couple of hours time difference. Stadiums, I've been over there, they're absolutely exceptional. I understand the controversy around building them, and we all abhor that, and we have to deal with that in a separate conversation. However, England's players going into that World Cup, I think, should be hitting peak. Because I remember when I was playing, I used to think actually getting into sort of October, November, December, that's when I really felt like, go on, I'm going to go through that English winter. That's where I'm going to go. It's where I really feel like I'm flying. You get to May, June, the year after, you're flagging a little bit. So I have to say that I still remain really optimistic about England. I know there's a lot of pessimism. I thought it was far too much. I mean, I'm all for pessimism at the right time. I just thought it was too much. Too much criticism of Gareth, too much criticism of the team. And I didn't feel the sort of depression and deflation that others have felt. I don't know why. Do you? Am I missing something?
No, it's results orientated, isn't it? I'm afraid that's the way the game is judged, really. And we have to live in that world. But I think Gareth Southgate's done a fantastic job, and I'm sure he's got another tournament in him. And hopefully, if it goes well, many more to come. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, I don't see an outstanding candidate just to take over at this moment in time.
Well, the ones that
Graham Potter's just
and Eddie Howe's just gone into a job, so they're not available. I'm sure they'd be, they want to get their jobs right that they've just taken on. So, but a nice optimistic note to end.
Very optimistic about England.
Very nice to get the podcast up and running again.
Yeah, because to be fair, that's not been the most pleasant of days. I've just realised I've got to walk back through Manchester.
The highest scoring Manchester derby in history, and that's where we started, and that's where we'll finish. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you, Martin.